There you go. Brilliant. So this topic tonight is, it's a big one. It's one that everybody's familiar with. It's one that most people at some point, probably on a weekly basis, will talk about to some degree, experiences with their own children or parent figure or whatever. But for me personally, a lot of stuff has happened very recently, which has kind of been a big game changer in some ways. And I just wanted to explore it because obviously as we experience new things with our children and they grow and we get older, as you were saying, Riz, you know, you get old, do you want to carry on doing the same stuff you were doing when you were like in your 20s, you know, early 30s, and then you're approaching 40, you reevaluate, and some of that stuff's been present with me recently, and I've had to kind of really think about that. But other things, I'm actually really enjoying learning about my children and these new experiences. So there's a mixed bag as well, you know, it's really important to explore it all. And I know some of it can make people feel uncomfortable, but other things are really full of joy and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, we don't have to go one particular route. We'll see where we end up. But I think it's important to just discuss it and see where we end up. Especially because last couple of years, we've been tried and tested with various aspects of life, not just parenting and that kind of thing, but, you know, relationships, friendships, and all sorts of things. So yeah, my first main point was I wrote down some topic points, and the first bit I want to start with is what is at the core of being a dad or father figure in your opinion? What is at the root of it all? What is the key thing, the most important thing, I guess, in being a parent figure or a role model to somebody as a father figure? Who wants to go? Jan?
Actually, I'm opening the floor to you guys today.
Well, you know what? I'll start because, as I mentioned, you're aware of this, Jan. And if you've looked back through the group discussions, you might have noticed I've recently, my cat is annoying me. Oh, he disappeared. One second, please.
It's not a commercial break.
Yeah, so recently, over the last couple of months, I went through an experience where I discovered that somebody who was reaching out to me, contacting me, who thought I might be their father, it turns out I actually am. So that's changed a lot for me in terms of I'm not just the father of 2 children anymore. I'm the father of 3 children. And that's shifted a lot of things in my thinking. And I think when I think about what's at the core of being a parent, that hasn't changed, but it means now my focus is on 3 people on a daily basis. And they're all at different stages of life. They're all doing different things. But I think at the core of it all for me has always been this need to just, or this inner part of me that's just this inner monologue that's always going on, where I feel like I need to just know that they're safe. I need to just know that they're doing what they really want to do, that they're exploring, that they're engaging with the right people, that they're surrounded by good people. And I think, so it's just that knowing for me that they are doing the things that make them happy, but not just to get by, not just for fun, but actually they're engaging with people, like I say, people and places and jobs and experiences, hobbies even possibly, you know, that are good for them, that are good for them at their core, I guess, you know, that they're making good decisions, good choices, but also that they get into experiment and learn by making mistakes too. But I guess if they're making mistakes, I just want to know that they are learning from those mistakes. And even if that takes 10 years for them to learn a lesson, one good lesson, that's good for me. But I think that connection, keeping that connection with them and just being aware of where they're at and what they're doing, even if they don't want me involved in it, that's good, because, you know, it's their life, it's their journey that they're kind of laying out for themselves, if that makes sense. So I don't want to be involved to a point where I'm trying to force a decision or force an opinion for them to live the life that I feel they need to live. That's for me, that's not part of it at all. But I want to be an influence, and I want to know that they're in good hands, that they're making good decisions for themselves. And I think that's always been a thing with my children from being very small. We've been very frank with them about stuff. We've been very blunt about things, very matter of fact with discussions around sexuality and relationships and you know, the bigger, wider world. And that's really set them in good stead, actually, for tackling the things they're tackling right now. So yeah, I think that will always remain with me as a core thing as a father.
Thank you for sharing that. You know, that's kind of it's a very kind of, it touched on a lot of different things. And I think for me, when, you know, I was listening to that, I was, you know, I could agree with a lot of the things that were said. But I think since last year, you know, and, you know, I did this live last week about big life changes and the impact of life changes. I think since, for me, I think the major changes that I've had last year, the shift in mental health and things like that, I've had to redefine what that meant for me. Because I was, from the moment the children were born, I've always been very, like, you know, very hands-on, very, you know, putting pressure on myself, like, you know, just kind of, you know, every sickness, every, you know, everything, you know, I'm there panicking, or, you know, every little thing, you know. And I think since last year, I've had to kind of reshape that, what that meant for me, because I was forced to actually take time out to be okay, take time out to look after myself. And so what that meant was that I had to distance myself for a while, in order, when I was incapacitated and I couldn't give. And obviously that came with a lot of dad guilt. You know, we often talk about mommy guilt, but daddy guilt is definitely a thing. You know, I've lived with it for a long time. And I've had to let go of the expectations, let go of the core, let go of all these things. And it's not easy, because as you guys were recording the group, you know, a few weeks ago, I mentioned about the fact that I felt like I wasn't really giving. I was saying that, you know, I didn't feel as, you know, as present, and that, you know, as a dad, as a husband, because there were so many different things that I was contended with. And it's not easy, but I've had to do that. I've had to let go of that core and that expectation that I place on myself to be the dad, to be present, to react, to knee jerk sometimes, to, you know, to nourish and to nurture, you know. And I've had to just kind of watch on the sidelines and watch how I kind of connect, how I'm drawn into their lives, how they're drawn into my life, and how we're able to kind of make it work in that way. So I think when you're asking that question for me, I can't give a comprehensive answer anymore. If you asked me, you know, a few years ago, then yes, I would have been able to, like, list it down. But now I can't, because I'm in a different space with that.
I appreciate that. I think that's really important to, you know, to acknowledge change and how things have shifted, because you can't always be the same person. We're not superhuman. We can only do so much, and things do change, and your children change, circumstances change, life events happen. Really important. And I think actually now hearing you say that, reflecting back throughout my child's lives, you know, from them being born, I have changed, but I think I've always tried to hold on to certain things, certain values, certain core things for myself. But I have learned to let go of some. I've picked up new habits or new ways of looking at things, but I've had to let some of that go and step back and go, no, they don't need me to do that, because it always ends up in this conflict where we're arguing over things. It's not good. It's not healthy, because they feel like they're making the choice. I mean, I should say is my children are older now, teenagers. Two of them are in their, well, one's in their 20s, two are older teenagers. So I've had to step back and let go of some of that stuff, because it always ends up in these heated debates, which, like I said, they think they're making the choices they have to make, they need to make for themselves. Even if you see, even if I see them making a mess and I'm going, oh, what? I can't watch that. I don't want to see that. I don't want them to do that. It's hurting them. It's messy. But they've got to figure this stuff out, So I've had to do that. But I think some things are still there at my core, which, are they good for me? Are they good for them? I don't know. I'm still learning.
I think that's what I was trying to say. Like, when there's these things at the core that are there that pull you back in, they just kind of pull you back to how you've always reacted towards things, how you've always viewed things. And yes, are they positive? Are they not? Again, it's that ongoing battle,
Yeah.
I think what he's just said there, it's rather interesting. And again, like as I said, the core values, we all mean the same, as I said, that the love that we all have, for our children. But I think to kind of throw a bit of a curveball as well, going back to what Eddie said, it's also the culture. Also, I know for myself, my family are from Pakistan, my parents, and so like we kind of got brought up in quite a strict Islamic background. Well, they tried the best. The older I got, the more kind of went upwards. And this was kind of a conversation I regularly have with one of my friends. So my son is mixed. So his mother is British nationality. And yes, I'm born and bred in England. But as I said, some of the values, like the whole halal, etc., and all that type of stuff, that's something I try to instill. Respective elders, which should be generic, but in an Islamic, it's a very, very, very oriented, family oriented. That's where we are. I don't know, so I've been now a single dad for about 6 years now, and it's kind of always how my dad kind of reacted to what I did, but it's kind of how he was brought up. It was kind of tough love, which you will probably get locked up for now if you did that type of thing. But I know kind of with myself, I've kind of had to analyze kind of how my dad parented myself and 3 older brothers. But sometimes I kind of defend it in a way, because I'm kind of like, no, because that's how he was brought up. He had 9 brothers and 3 sisters, and he was in the middle. And he was always the grafter, the moneymaker in the family. So his nature was kind of a different kind of parenting method, whereas the mother was the darling. And I know myself, kind of going back to the example of, I think the prime example is when a kid falls over, the maternal instinct in you wants to run over and pick them up and give them a cuddle, and everything's going to be all right. But do you? Or do you sit back and just watch them and see how they react? Are they going to cry? Are they going to push it off? And you kind of sat back on, oh, what do I do? I'm torn. Because if that was my dad, he'd say, get up, otherwise I'll put you down. And not like in a vile way, but it's kind of a tough love again. And I kind of know with my son, and going back to what you said about the mistakes, and it's kind of true. I look how I got brought up, and I've kind of instilled that a lot of my parenting. I'm kind of like, dude, if you want to live in a dump, that's fine. Then in that case, the parenting comes out. In that case, then I'm not going to wash anything for you. Then you could do it yourself. Do you want your food? Oh well, do it yourself. Bear in mind, my son's only 8. So, but as I say, it's kind of, as I said, I know with myself, it was the culture thing, and then it's kind of like, how do I want to do this? Do I want him to go to mosque the way that I did? Do I want to kind of make him to read the Quran the way that I did? Do I kind of want him to do this type of thing, kind of what I did? But then I kind of reflect on myself, and I kind of like, well, no, I was forced to do that. And again, not a negative way, but it's a case of my parents didn't know any different. That was the most important thing. And I say this to people, they didn't know anything different. Like anybody who come to this country, that's the way they're being brought up. And eventually, as years go on, generation to generation, it's up to you to kind of pass that knowledge on. So I give my son kind of the best of both worlds. Like he will, when he comes here, he'll eat halal. But when he's over there, it's not existent. When it comes here, when it's Eid, so our Christmas, and I'll give him the option, do you want to come to the mosque with us in the morning? Do you not? It's up to you, babes. He was like, yeah, Dad, I will. And obviously there's a part of me that warms me, because I'm kind of like, get in, because I was reluctant to do that when I was a child. So as I say, for me, it's kind of weird. Obviously, I think we're all kind of on the same wavelength, but as I said, the culture thing, which is kind of I got thrown in. And as I said, it was kind of up to me. It was a challenge, a complete massive challenge, because I'm like, do I listen to my parents? Do I send him to the mosque when he comes? But no, because then I've only got him X, Y, and Z days, then I won't get enough time with him. Is that selfish of me? What do you want to do? Do you want to spend time with me, or do you want to go there? What do you want to do? And I think that's the most important thing these days, is to actually sit down and listen to the child. What do you want? What do you want in life? And again, if we go back to, our past, what we were like in school, and, we kind of didn't have the choices to make compared to now. And as I said, we don't want to instill our past onto their future.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting that you mentioned the culture thing, because again, for me, that's something that's very prominent as well. Whether it's for me culturally and religiously, as you mentioned, again, it was these things that you just did, that you were just, that's what it is. And you just do them. And, even religiously, I've had to find myself in a very not difficult, but like interesting position with my son, because my son is older, he's 7 this year. So he's more cognizant, and so I've had to, sometimes I'm like, okay, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do this. And then I had to think, well, actually, hold on. How does he feel about doing certain things? And I've always been a bit afraid of the response, it's like, you give the choice, you've got the answer that you want, like literally there. And then you're just like, oh, please say the right thing. And so far, thankfully, things are aligning. But I know that at one point, they won't, because that's just the way it is. When I look at my own evolution, at some point things in the line. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying about my stance, which is to step back and watch a lot. That's what I mean. I am allowing myself to not press, whether it's my agenda, my thoughts, my feelings onto them, but I'm watching, I'm listening more. That's what I mean. Because like you said, Riz, we don't want to change their future by impressing what we've been, our past or our present and things like that. So that's very important. It is.
Yeah, and what I love about that is the sitting back and listening. Listening is the most important thing we can do with anybody. We've talked about that lots in actually other discussions recently, whatever the topic. But there's been a lot around discussion and confrontation and how we hear each other, how we listen, and then how we engage with each other next time. And if we can't do that with our children first and foremost, then we can't profess to be doing well with that with other people, can we? Because our children are the most important people to us in our lives, apart from our partners maybe or whatever, So I think that's really, really important. And listening is hard to do, especially if you've not had good practice because maybe your own parents didn't listen to you very well, or you haven't had other positive role models that have listened well to you in the past. So you feel like you're connecting with someone and that they're understanding you, but then the same things might happen again and they go, why did you do that? Or why did you act like that or behave like that or say those things? And then you wonder, did you listen last time? Did you understand me? And I think that's really important. So if we can get that right, then our children hopefully will get that right. And that really is the only lesson we can really hope for them to learn from us if we are doing that well. Because there are loads of things, aren't there, that, if we think we're doing well with something in life, like my business is doing well, I've got business success advice for my child when they're old enough, it's like, well, it is what you've done, what you're doing really well, actually what they need to hear or what they need to do. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but listening is key. And it's hard, especially as they get older. It's not harder to listen, but I guess harder to understand, because for me, when now they're teenagers, when they're talking about the things that are important to them, and they're sharing their views, their opinions on culture and religion and politics and war and all that stuff, and so much of that rife in the world right now, it's quite hard to follow sometimes. You can sit and be silent for an hour listening, but do you really understand the terminology and the things that they're saying, and how do you get to the core of that in a way that's easy for them to then move on and engage with you again in next time? So that's been challenging for me, but I do my best to listen, and it's it's a journey. It's something you have to practice.
With you, it's that kind of stuff. With me at the moment, it's gaming. I'm not a gamer, I'm not a gamer. My son,
I can see the posters.
All my son talks on about is the Nintendo Switch, the Minecraft, the this and that, and that's just not my world. Yeah. So I'm listening, but I'm not necessarily connecting. I'm like, okay. So I guess in that way, yours are talking about the world because they're at that stage. But with me, it's at that level. We're at that level. And I've just got, sometimes I feel bad because I'm just like, bro, like that's enough now. Like, stop it. I don't understand any of this.
Yeah.
But it's the beauty of, yes, my son is into all the things that I'm into as well, like, but he's got these other things that are just foreign to me, and that's okay,
Yeah, and that's beautiful. We can learn from them too, because the world's changing so fast that we can't understand it unless they explain it to us. So we just go with it, don't we?
I think that's what's quite crazy. Like, and I know that the flip side of that as well. I remember when I was younger, and we had a Commodore Amiga, if you know your computers back in the days, 1200, used to be amazing. And there was a game called Road Rash. And me and my brothers played it. Basically, it's the most like monotone game of the world. You just go straight and punch people on the bike. Yeah, exactly. But I remember once my dad came in, and my dad was a steel worker, like he's retired and everything now, worked there for God knows how long. And he came in and once, and this is the father of me now. And I look back, and he watched. He stood and watched for a couple of minutes. And obviously, I was on my feet at the time. I was like, oh, like that. And it was like, oh, give me a little go. And I didn't. And I go, oh, you just have to wait. And I think I was about 13, like 12, 13, something like that. And he kind of like got like a little huff, as it were, but he kind of like, oh, okay, I'll leave it then. And he walked off. And now, upon reflection, being older and being a father, like my son plays like GTA, that type of stuff. Jesus Christ, 80 won't believe that. But he plays like that. And I kind of like a couple of times, and I've seen him do it to me. And it kind of brings back things. But then, I sat down and I told him, I went, look, I did this to Granddad a long time ago. I said, who knows? I said, if I got him to play, he could have been a gamer now, you know what I mean? Granddad could have had a cool gamer chair and everything like that. But, only God could wish her. And it's quite crazy because I taught him that. And now all of a sudden he'd be like, so like, again, like I said, this is like my games room, like stroke my office. And like, as I said, so I've got like my PS5 and everything all this here. And so we take 10s playing in here. And, it will come in and then he'd be like, oh, Dad, do you want to jump in? And like I said, his attitude's kind of changed. But I said, I know if I could go back, like, if I could turn it around. But as you kind of say, going back to the modern era now, it's that society has changed so much. Like like Jan, going to your profession, like the intellect of the children these days, damn, we are stupid. Like, you know what I mean?
No, it's very true. It's very true. And I often say this. And that was the debate on the group like a few weeks ago. And then it turned to something else. I was saying that everybody was like, oh, the world is a scary place and all this and that. And I was like, listen, I work with these kids. There's hope. I believe in the adaptation. I think that every era has this type of people that it forges. These kids are forged for this time. To us, it looks scary. Well, not to all of us. Some of us who are still got that our foot in, that are still young at heart. it's not that scary, you know. It's not
Another feeling.
exactly.
Another feeling.
This is what I mean. Like, it's not, but you know, because these kids are, you know, equipped. They are. Like the conversations that I have as a teacher, I'm sitting here telling them about stuff, but they teach me more. You know, how much stuff can I just tell you? Even about just the LGBTQ community, because that's a big topic. It's been a big topic of our, you know, our era and things like that. Like the kids are just, you know, the way that the kids handle relationships, the way that they view, you know, gender, the way that they view all these different things. Like they've got a certain like emotional intelligence that we didn't have, you know, and I honor that. I honor that, and I know that, you know, yes, there's the challenges, there's everything else, and actually everybody is made for their era, and they find the way to make it work. Absolutely. And that's why, in a way, I'm not worried about my children, because a lot of people are always like, oh, you know, this, you need to be worried the way that the world is going. No, humans have always found a way to adapt. Every generation finds its way to be. So I'm not that worried when it comes to that. I'm not.
Yeah. That's a good place to be, and I think we do keep learning from our children, and it makes sense. You know, look at historical figures, and we read about them, and how when they were young they did amazing things. You know, these young kings. You know, I'm not just referring to biblical stuff, but there are other sources as well, other stories and examples. But we hear these stories, don't we, growing up, and you hear King David doing this, and Jesus, when he was a little boy, you know, going and reading the scriptures to adults, and they're going, how do you know this stuff? You know, how can you do that? You're a child. But, you know, they're supposed to impress, you know, they're supposed to impress us and baffle us and challenge us and our thinking and our actions. And it's up to us to go, I'm listening. Because if we do the whole, because if we just go, oh, no, I'm an adult, I know everything, you know, because adults do, don't they? Some adults do that, but then we're lost, and our children are lost because there's no connection. And you know, connection's everything, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And I think we've touched a bit on how we. One of my points was how we kind of influence or encourage and support our children, and I think we've touched on a lot of that by listening, but by actually acknowledging the things that they're saying, learning from them and putting those things into action and asking them what they need so we can provide them the tools to do what they need to do. And I think that's where we're going with that, isn't it? Loving them may look different for each person, and everybody's got their own concept of love as well. And I think you know, when you hear those words, unconditional love, you hear that through every culture, religion, and you know, all the stories. What does love look like? You know, the idea of love, the concept of love, unconditional love is loving somebody through every trial and every circumstance the same, regardless. It's hard to do.
And every choice.
Exactly.
Choice is such a huge part of this. Because as we understand it, these young people, these people that we created, will get to the point where they'll make their own choices. And that's where it's tested. That's where the test comes. You know, will you be, with that love that you built up for them, would that stand the test of time? Because this is it. You've prepped them, you've nurtured them, you've given to them. And then in the back of your mind, there's this thing where you're like, well, I've given you all this, and I've given you the path to walk. So therefore, when it's time for you to choose, of course you will choose my way. We all have that thing.
Yeah.
You know, a little bit like, is it? So as much as, you know, unconditional, I don't know. I think unconditional is something that we learn. I don't think it's something that's innate in us. It isn't. If anybody tells me, oh, they're unconditional, like, okay, maybe they've got to a certain point of detachment that is like so like Buddha-esque. Like they've got like the whole like Buddha thing going, like, yes, I've detached from life and everybody. Okay. But if you're human like me, I don't believe it. You know, I think it's something we grow into. it's definitely something we're growing to.
Absolutely. What would you say, Riz? What's your experience been with like receiving or giving that love? Because it like I said, it can look different to everybody. And just very briefly, my experience has been one of when really challenging moments come up with my children, where really serious things have happened, either to them or by them, to someone else, because it can happen on both sides. And I found myself getting so stressed, anxious, worried, and annoyed or reactive with them because I just don't understand. I don't get why they did a certain thing or said a certain thing or why they've been behaving a certain way for some time. So I believe again, going back to that core thing, like love, at least, I feel like I've still loved them in that moment, but my reaction, my words, the way I speak hasn't, possibly to some people observing as a fly on the wall would say, that's not loving. But isn't it? Because my perspective is you are still loving your children and anyone else for that matter, even if you are challenging them and saying, you're being a dick, you are being really nasty to these people or you've done a really bad thing. And I'm angry about it, actually. I'm frustrated. And surely that's okay too. That's love. But it's how you resolve it and how you talk it through. And so what's your experience been with that? Have you had any kind of significant experiences? I thought you might have. Everybody has.
Yeah, we won't talk comments, but yeah. But you know, I mean, it's such an open, like, ended question, isn't it, in a way, because we talk about, the unconditional love. And again, you've always got to revert back to your own childhood, your upbringing. Did you have the correct, loving from your parents, from your family, and that type of stuff? And again, your surroundings. As some people have been fortunate to have a good upbringing, some people haven't. Some people have had to struggle. So sometimes we have to look at that as well. Look at the different scenario circumstances. And I think a huge one, and I think this is where I've kind of, how can I put this? I think this is where I've kind of developed over the past few years. People keep forgetting it's two parents, okay? And what the main important thing is, it's the child. And this is where sometimes what happens is that things get murky and you start attacking one another. And it's, again, it's that innocent child, children, what's in the middle, what gets caught up in these games. And this has a massive knock-on effect for the children. As I said, you could even go back to like 5-10 years ago where this thing was non-existent, the children's feelings. Again, as I said, as time has developed, as I said, and if you go back to time and that kind of things, it's like, no, you'll do as you're told. But now it's becoming more and more of a parent, single parents are divorcing and whatnot and that type of stuff. And it's kind of changed the methodology behind parenting now. And it's kind of like, okay, so yes, there's unconditional love, there's mollycoddling, there's overbearing, and it's kind of like, how do you do this? Because all of a sudden it doesn't become about unconditional love. And this is, I'll put my hands up here, and this is where all of a sudden it becomes a competition. Who loves the child more? Is it them or is it you? And this is where shit gets real, because this is where people forget it's the child what's involved. Children these days, and obviously you can tell me this, and like children's these days as well, like, in the school and that type of stuff, they're being more aware of things, they're getting brought up of things, whereas we didn't, back then. As I said, we talk about, biblical terms is something that we did in school, but now that doesn't even sometimes get mentioned. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, please. But as I said, it's sometimes your own ability as well to kind of put that hate to one side and kind of think, listen, I love you. I'm here for you. If you need to talk, I'm here. But also, sometimes there's a fine line between being a parent and being a friend. And this is where sometimes it can get confusing, because that child is stuck in the middle and they want to talk to you, but at the same time, they don't wish to because they're talking about the other parent. So again, it's kind of putting pressure on a child these days, because then all of a sudden they're like, who can I talk to? And because the society that we live in now, and they say something in school, then it becomes a whole hoo-ha.
Yeah, that's it.
It becomes a whole different thing completely. The child is not loved. The child is feeling left out. The child is like, have no love. The child is upset. The child is depressed, like that type of stuff. So I think, this is where, in an ideal world, you want every single parent to co-parent, every single, no matter what scenario, you always want the best love of two things. That's what you want in life. And at the end of the day, that's what you want. As I said, I got brought up with my dad, a very strict Muslim background and that type of stuff, but I always knew I couldn't go to him for advice. Hell no. I'm 26 and I still don't go to him. 37, right, but I still don't go to him. Sleep that in there. But I still wouldn't go to him. Do you know what I mean? Because that's kind of the relationship that my dad's had. But I always know my dad will always have my back no matter what. The occasional time, do you know what I mean? Like, I will sit down with him, he'll give me some words of wisdom, and the old school alpha male parent, man up. And that's fine, because sometimes you do need that kick in the nuts.
Absolutely.
To be like, you know what? Yeah, you're right, actually. What have I got to bitch and moan about? Do you know what I mean? Compared to the bigger picture out there. But the difference is, this is my situation. I'm allowed to bitch about it. Allow me to bitch about it. But you know what? Keep the child out of this, because this is where people conflict again. The child doesn't need to hear this. This is why you have friends. This is why you have family. Go and talk to them. You don't need to manipulate the child to do in your favor by telling them the truth. Why do they need to know the truth for? Why do they need to? They can find that out when they're older. They'll know that mommy is saying one thing, daddy is saying one thing. And it's up to the child to know the difference with how the parent reacts. That is the most important thing, is the reaction of a parent. And this is where these days it gets so lost, because now, due to social media, that it's all about impressing other people now. And you're forgetting it's the child what's involved. And going back to what we said about a choice, I did a music video, not last year, the year before, and they asked, "What's called this? Would you like to be in it?" I went, "Yeah." What was it about? So anyway, and they were like, "Would your son like to do it?" I was like, "I'll ask." So I asked him, and obviously you can imagine, "Oh my God, I've got to be able to tell you with my dad." I was like, "Right, chill." You know what I mean? And we did it. I did, know what I mean? As I said, as a parent, to see his face. And it was one of the biggest smiles I'd ever had in my life. I'm so proud of my dad and that type of thing. But then again, it goes back to what we kind of discussed previously. Is that something that I forced upon him? Is that something that he's just doing to appease me? Or is that something that he genuinely likes to do? The answer was the latter. Because, as I said, when I went to school to collect him, he was telling all his friends, he was telling everybody, he's got his own phone, he was doing a TikTok. He was like, "Oh, I'm on this video." Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, my God, Jesus Christ, 7-year-old. I'm like, but he's getting more fame than I am these days. What's going on here? This wasn't my dream. But as a parent, as I said, it was probably the most satisfying thing in the world. But again, it's because I try my best as a parent not to kind of put that extra pressure on him, and you know what I mean? But also, as I said, like the values that we kind of have. But as I say, like it's crap, and you know what I mean? It's not going to get fixed sooner. You know what I mean? But you do need what people need to do is take their own naivety out of it. They need to realize it's not about them, it's about the kid. That is the end all. I could sit here and say a gazillion things. I'm sure every single one person, every single dad, every single mum can say that about the other partner. But don't do it in front of the child. That is the worst thing to do. And I put my hands up, I've done that in the past. Shouldn't do it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, I think you did hit on tons and tons of stuff there, like examples and just ways that it happened with you. But that's all we can do, I believe, is to take ourselves out of it, and put the child first in front of us. And because if we consider how we felt when we were younger, when we weren't listened to, when we didn't receive the response we not wanted, but needed, because we might look back and go, actually, no, that's not really how I felt. That's not what I wanted. I was argumentative. I was angsty. I was full of hormones. I was being a knob. But you know, when we take all that and consider it, then we surely we can consider and understand where they are in that moment as well.
Mhm,
You know,
mhm.
that's what you were saying, isn't it? And if
Yeah,
we can put ourselves in that position, then they get exactly what they need, whether it's what they want, whether it's what they expected or what we expected. Doesn't matter, does it? It's what they need in that moment. Just somebody to sit there and go, I might not understand or agree. Say what you need to say. And I've had so much more breakthrough, especially with my son in that regard, because I think he gives me more time in that respect, because it's a father-son thing in some ways. Not that that's limited or restricted to a father and son. You know, it can be father and daughter, but I think we've always had a bigger connection, a closer connection, just because of time we've spent together, interests we've had shared in common. So it's been a little bit easier. But as he's got older, I start to feel like I understand him less. So I have to put myself back in my shoes as a child sometimes, or at his age, and go,
Yeah.
I felt pretty terrible at that age when I felt lonely. You know, at 16, he's 16 now. At 16, I was like trying to figure out what we're going to do as a job, a career,
yeah,
um, who my real friends were, why people didn't listen, why people didn't understand me. And then I joined the army, and that messed me up even more. And all that happened because I didn't have a connection with somebody that would just listen to where I was actually at. So now I'm able to do that with my son at 16. He might say the wackiest, wildest, and seemingly random nonsense. But when you really start to hear what he's saying, it's like, oh shit, this kid is on like another level above every other level that I thought he could be at this stage. And it's just, and I love it because he makes me laugh, but he also makes me go, oh, I'm reevaluating my political stance and my, you know, beliefs and my understanding about this thing and that thing. And I love that. But sometimes it upsets me and sometimes it really cuts, you know, because he just is very blunt. But I also welcome that because it's how he feels, you know. That's it. That's, you know, that's where I am now with him. And with my daughter. Well, one of my daughters, I've just met one of them. So the other one, she's at uni, and we don't have that time together at the minute. It's just, you know,
yeah,
she's vacant, she's busy, and she's distracted. That's fine as well. But at least I get that with him at home, and I can still learn from that, and I still grow from that. But he just needs to be heard. And he's told me as much, you know, like, no, that's not what I meant. You're not hearing me. So then I stop talking, I stop moving and sit and say, tell me again. And then it comes, you know, and the connection gets better. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. But we learn by making a mess of it as well, don't we?
Yes.
Jumping
Yeah.
in feet first, and yeah.
I think like an example, somebody, an ex-partner of mine brought up once. So I remembered so she had a little boy, and obviously I've got my little boy. I remember we were in my old place, and we would have sat doing nothing. We were meant to be watching the film, meant to be. And now what it is, once I get in a film, that's it. Like, I'm going to ignore the world. I love it. Like, I watch Netflix and Amazon, etc. all day. And then I remember, then obviously they went, and a couple of times, you know, like I went to see my son, and he was literally like just on his phone, and he was just constantly like, you know, just like lives in his phone. And then I remembered once, and the tables were turned because I said I'm very active on my phone. As I said, for a while, I worked on a live streaming app. So I would always constantly live stream. I had to do X amount, like hours per month on that type of thing. And then I just remembered, like, you know, he kind of said something off the cuff once. And long story short, and I kind of realized, you know, I'm kind of neglecting him to be on my phone. What the hell? And it goes back to the whole time is precious. And I remembered, and again, as I said, we learn from our mistakes. And I remember I just turned around and said, what am I doing here? I'm, you know, scrolling through Tinder, as it were, and, you know, trying to find, you know, someone else and that type of stuff. And I've got precious time with my son. And then what I'm talking on an app, and yes, I'm making us money, so I'm getting paid for it at the same time, but I'm missing out on time with my son when I could be sat talking to him and listening to him. And what Eddie, kind of what you nailed on the head, and it's quite fascinating, like you said, you're not hearing And that is so interesting, because that is kind of the gist of what he was trying to get at. He was like, from like A to B, but he was going around, as it were. And I sat back and I was like, I call him Baba, like my temper demon for him. And I was like, listen, Bab's like, what are you going on about? And then you can see he was getting frustrated. He was getting was getting flustered and that type of stuff. And that's, again, as a parent, this is where you've got to kind of be like, okay, how do you approach this? Do you go in all guns blazing? What are you getting at? What are you doing? Whatever. Or do you take the calm, a decent approach and be like, take the time. It's okay. What is it you want to talk about? And again, sometimes you've got to be quite careful, because at the same time, that could come across pressurizing at the same time. But, and you've got to put them at ease and make them comfortable. And, then eventually, if they feel comfortable enough, then eventually they will get out and they will tell you, but at their pace. And sometimes this is where, as a parent, you struggle sometimes, because you kind of want it at your pace, but times have changed. Times have changed. You've got to kind of be like, okay, if you don't want to talk about it now, you know where I am. And as I say, it's kind of like crazy in that nature, but yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Out of that respect.
Everything that you're describing there is kind of my relationship with my students. Oh, he's on camera today. Hello.
Hello.
Are you joining us on camera, or?
Pardon?
Are you joining us on camera?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Is that just juice, or is that vodka in there as well? What's
that? So that kind of describes my relationship with my students, a lot of it. That's what I do, daily. It's that kind of thing where, you have to placate them enough, but be firm enough, but hearing them. And I think that's been one of my success as a teacher, because I'm known as that teacher. I'm the teacher that the kids come to. They know that, they can come to me. I'll let something slide, but, I'm always going to be quite, firm and whatever when I need to be. And my thing has been, the biggest part of my success has been, I'm the only teacher, and I always say this, and I'll remind them of this, I'm the only teacher that will apologize to them. The only one. And anytime something happens, I'm like, well, when I've lost it, whatever, and it wasn't them, and I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, and I apologize in front of the class. I do. I have no problems doing that. And then I take them out and I talk to them privately, and I'm like, I apologize. And I was like, but how many teachers do that? I often do that on purpose. They're like, yeah, I've never had that from a teacher, because they don't. And that was way before I became a dad. And I thought, yes, and this is something that I will do with my children. So as young as my kids are, with Bo, for instance, whenever he does, because his behavior is a bit testy at the moment. So we've had this talk. And whenever I get upset, I always make sure that I apologize. I always go back and I'm like, you know what? I'm sorry for shouting. I'm sorry for getting angry. Okay. But what I'm saying, is this, and I explain. It takes a lot of explaining, and I think, and for me, it feels like I'm kind of stepping back into work mode. So a lot of the time, because I do this daily, and I've had to realize that I can't be lazy with it. I can't be lazy with it, because it matters more that I do that with my children at home than my students, So that's something interesting that I've had to kind of work with, but it's absolutely beautiful to kind of like bring that and be able to open. It opens the conversation. It opens the bridge. It builds the bridge. It's absolutely awesome. Absolutely awesome. It takes so much humility.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think what you said there's really, I've come in at a very interesting point, because, like, for me, I've got two stepsons. My oldest stepson is 17, is going to be 18 next month. So I got dropped into a situation when I was 23 of having a teenager, having not had them kind of like up to that point. And those, as you said, just like losing your temper with them testing boundaries, all that kind of stuff. And I think by having that experience beforehand, and then having Willow come along 3.5 years ago, it's made me a lot more patient. And I think it's very interesting what you say there, Jan, about like teachers not apologizing. Like, we're all humans. We all lose our temper sometimes, and we'll lose our shit a little bit with people that don't deserve it. But then it's almost like in those positions of authority, it's seen as, well, I'm allowed to do that. And then people then wonder why, when kids are having an emotional outburst, we then expect them to apologize for that emotional outburst. But then we, as the adult in that situation, aren't prepared to do that with them. And it's a do as I say, not as I do situation. And kids are too smart for that. Like, you can't get away with that. And when you reflect on if your children are displaying certain behaviors, I think a lot of the time, if you reflect on it, it's because they've watched you. Might not have been in the last day or in the last week, but they've learned that from somewhere, either from you or from the people kind of there around, sort of thing. So I thought that was very, very interesting what you brought up there about, like, being prepared to apologize and accept responsibility, because that's the only way they're going to learn.
Yeah, thanks for that, Deej. And what I think, just on the back of that now, because I think we've got like 5 minutes to discuss this, and I think we can still keep on this part of the topic. But I think where we live in a world where there is so many negative examples. If we're thinking about the purpose we're here having this discussion as men, as parents, as fathers, there are so many negative influences and examples of how a man probably shouldn't be in the world. Like, there's so many negative examples of how men do bad things and how men make bad choices and how they speak and act to people. You know, you could even go back and discuss we can do this at another point as well, like just how leaders in the world, predominantly male figures, are angry. These tyrant figures, they're very dominant, they're very authoritative, they're very overbearing and very in control of all these things. And I think if we you know, they see a lot of that anyway. Our children are seeing that all the time on media and things like that. And yes, the world is changing and it's catching up in some ways, and we're getting more positive examples on social media. TikTok's got men doing funny, loving, nurturing things, you know, silly things, and showing a more caring and sensitive and silly side. So they're kind of coming away from that, but there's still so many negative examples. So in terms of what you were saying, Deej, you know, and this whole discussion is that we can learn from the mistakes, you know, we can learn from the examples that we see, the things that we're used to. You know, we've seen more of it than they have in our lifetime on the media, world events, how they deal with this stuff. Not always very nice to see. And I guess it's not just those people we can learn from. Obviously, we can learn from peers, people that we're close to, other examples. But I think, you know, that's a really good way to think about it, in terms of, if we're getting angry, you know, we're just affirming that the way that the world is, or the way that it has been for so long, and we don't want them to see more of that. We want them to realize that they can actually enact a change, that they can do it differently, that they can be a different kind of leader, that they can be a different kind of man, that yes, you can have opinions, yes, you can be assertive, and yes, you can be an authority figure, and yes, you can be a leader, but you don't need to do it like that. You know, you can do it from a very, not always equally balanced. It doesn't have to always be like perfectly level, but you can still have a bit from both sides. You can have the nurturing side, you can have the strong leadership type, you can, you know, that side of you. You can also have, you know, the loving, caring, come and hug me, you know, I'm here for you. Because there's been so much in the world in way of a bad example, you know, for them to see, to follow, to learn from. You know, it's kind of, it's not our duty necessarily, but I think there's an element of, like, if we're gonna be a positive role model in their lives, if we're going to be anything to them, we can show them that there's one way and there's another way, and there's lots in between, and it's up to them to explore and ask questions and for us to listen. and try and understand. And it goes back to the points we were making earlier about being that listener, that good listener. But there's so much going on, and because we're more connected, obviously they have access, don't they, to more examples of what it means to be a man, a woman, a child, a leader, a business owner, an entertainer. Like, there's so much going on. Crazy.
I like the word duty. That I know a lot of people don't like it nowadays. We try to shy away from that term, but I like it. I think it's accountability. We have to be accountable to these things, to our what we're bringing, what we're upholding, what we're passing on. Absolutely, whether we want to or not, there's an aspect of duty that's there. And when we're talking about fatherhood and things like that, yeah, there's a duty, whether we want to or not. We have a duty, whether it's a duty, like I said, to listen, to step back, to be involved, to nurture. Like we can't escape that term. We can't. I know that society tries to dissociate us from the terms that are very. How can I explain? What's the word? The terms that are quite not militant, but like the strong terms, but we need them. We need them. We can't completely dissociate ourselves from that responsibility.
Yeah, I do fully agree with that statement. When I mentioned the word duty, I was thinking about those things, and actually that's important, to step in at the right time, or to step back, or just to, whatever in that situation, in that moment. But I guess that the thing that I was thinking of before you said that, Jan, was this whole idea that we have a duty to guide them for as long as possible, to make sure they succeed. And it's not up to us to make them succeed. It's not up to us to get them to a point where they're happy and settled and they're in a perfect relationship. I think that's kind of where I was thinking before you said what you said. But I do fully agree with you that there is a duty of care, that we listen, that we say, oh, hang on a minute, that we just step back and stay quiet if necessary, and that's important just as much. So yeah, there's a lot to learn, isn't there, as parents? So much to learn. Learning all the time.
We'll come to Jan from now on. That's what we'll do.
Pardon? Sorry?
We'll come to you. We'll do a curriculum.
We learn from each other. Seriously, I tell you, it's so amazing that we can have these kind of things. Because, like I said, this is something that I personally, that's always my thing. Because I was, from my history, a bit of my history, I kind of helped to raise my siblings. I'm the eldest, I'm the eldest of 6, so I helped to raise my siblings from very early on. My dad was working, he was working for the big companies. We were traveling all the time. So I was the dad figure from very early on. So for me, becoming a father to my children was predestined. Like my siblings are my children first. My siblings are my children first. So, for me to get to this point today, it had to be perfect, because I had so much practice. But then you don't actually get this until you're in it, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is a completely different setting, completely different experience, completely different everything. And, that's the reason why I beat myself up. This is it. Because I've had these expectations I've placed on myself. I've been a nurturing man for a very long time. I need to be able to provide also. I need to be able to do all these things. And that's always difficult. And then church comes into it, religion comes into it, Now, church places a huge importance on fatherhood and the place of the father and what you can give and things like that. And so that's also, that's created a lot of things. And so the anxiety is quite strong sometimes. But I don't see it as a bad thing that I'm feeling that way sometimes, because it helps to pick me up, it helps me to keep myself accountable on my offering and what I'm giving to my children. Yeah,
absolutely. And just as much as well, you want them to be involved with what you're doing, don't you? But not necessarily as a, you must do this, you have to. But you want them to understand, you want them to show interest, or you want them to at least see what you do and see why it's important to you as well, because it works both ways, and that's a good example to show them, isn't it?
I think
Sorry,
that's
I know we've got. Oh, sorry. Go on, Riz.
No. I was going to go on a rant there, but you go yours first. Go on.
You know, it's important that you mentioned like the way to follow and stuff. For instance, I've had this, like, my dad wanted me to become a doctor, like somewhere like that, but I didn't follow that route. And I know that, there's this thing where he's always like, it has this thing that his firstborn son didn't do what, he did, and, as much as I've got my children today, I'm always talking to bro. He can see everything that I'm doing. I don't know how he makes sense of it in his head, because I do so many things. I don't know how he kind of makes sense of it. But I'm always saying to him, that his business is, you're going to take this and that. And he seems, interested enough. But I had to even step back. When I said to you last, about taking away expectation, I've even stepped back and said, you know what? He may not even, because I didn't. My dad was like telling me as I was growing up, and I didn't. So I mustn't expect and place that expectation on him. So again, that's another thing, and that's why I find that removing these expectations from these kids is the best way to live, because then you don't get your heart broken.
Totally agree.
When they get to
Absolutely.
18, 19, you're like, actually, Dad, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do X, Y, and Z. And you're like, so yeah.
I think that kind of like touched on one of the topics that what you kind of said. It's the role model, and I know, like, all of us, like a few years ago, I had an epiphany. I used to work in the finance game. I was quite high up, and I used to work in banking for quite a while. Oh, I hated it with a passion. Couldn't stand it. And then I was such a negative person compared to what I am now. And then I remembered I did a few acting gigs here and now, nothing special, just the odd one or two. But every time I did it, I had a huge face, like a smile on my face. I loved it. And then I remembered once I was collecting my son from school. It was Valentine's, completely never forget, because he made me proud as well, because he was in the back seat, and then he turned around. I was like, oh, how was your day at school? He was like, oh, my girlfriends are doing my head in. They cut me 2 letters, blah, blah. Obviously, they're playing me. I was like, I'm so proud of you. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, that's
Of
my
course.
boy. That's my boy. But then, the reciprocation. Oh, so how was yours, Dad? Then before he said it, and this was bearing in mind, he was about 5 or 6 at the time. And this is a complete impact. And then he turned about it before he goes, so how was yours, Dad? And before I answered, then he goes, oh, let me guess, you hated it, you were born, you couldn't stand it, and you just want to go home to bed. And then the joke factor got kind of taken out. And my mum was driving at the time, and I remembered, and I was like, shit, like, what the hell? That's how he looks at me. I'm his dad. I'm meant to be kind of his superhero, his is someone he looks up to, and that type of shit. It's like, is that the impression that I'm giving? A bloke who just doesn't give a shit about life. What am I doing? What am I playing at? And then I remembered I had my partner at the time, and probably one of the best things she ever did, to be fair, is like she said to me, she goes, the only time I ever see you happy is when you talk about your acting. She goes, you have such a huge smile on your face. Why don't you pursue it? I was like, do you reckon? She was like, yeah. And I did. I just couldn't get over the fact that my son, my life, and, he had said that to me. And the fact that, I'm meant to be this positive role model, as it were, emphasis on the role model. Technically, I'm not, am I? You know what I mean? What's he got to look to? Like the fact that I feed him and clean him, put him to bed. That's nothing. Anyone could do that. And then I remembered, and then, like, I got into work, and then a couple of hours had gone. Long story short, I walked out. I was like, fuck this, I can't do it. Then, I was like, I remembered I sat outside a certain building, and I sat there for a few hours. I turned my phone off. I just sat there and analysed, and I was like, I'm a dad. That's my number one job. Everything else comes beneath that. Everything, even me. Everything's for them. And then again, you put yourself in your parents' shoes, don't you? When you kind of think, now I know how they felt, how they, even though they worked 18, 19 hours a day, how they wanted you to do a certain job. Because at the end of the day, that they just wanted the best for you. That's what we forget. It's what they want for you, not for them. It's what they want for you. It's because they don't know any difference compared to the modern parent these days. And I remember that as time went on, then, you know, getting to the gist of it now that I do my acting, I do my modeling, and like, as I said, I've been on Netflix, I've been on Amazon Prime and things like that, and TV shows and whatnot. And then he sees me and he's got such a smile on his face, and, you know, he's telling his friends, and you know, he's like, that's my dad. And like, I've actually got a part in the brand new Batman movie as well. So I'm in the new Batman movie. And then, you know, so he tells people in that, he goes, my dad's in Batman. And like, you know, and I think he actually said to one person, he was like, oh, he said like, oh, my dad's Batman. I was like, your dad is not Batman. Don't be saying that one now. That one, if only I'd been knocking Batman out. And then it was hilarious. But the fact is, all of a sudden, as a father, and to see him like that now, it's amazing to see the smile on his face, how jolly he is to turn around and say, my dad, compared to like, even though like, you know, beforehand, and as I said, me, myself, it's kind of, when I've talked again the past couple of weeks, I pimped this room out. It's kind of like my office as well as my games room, as it were. And I love it. I come in here, I lock myself away and do stuff. And again, I did something for ITV, I think about 2 weeks ago. Was it, Jan? About 2 weeks ago? The thing I sent to you. And all I can think about is like, I was like, oh my God, my son's going to get to see him, this telly. I'm not going to tell him. He's just going to be sat there on Saturday night and he's going to say, what the, my dad? And I love it in that respect. And as I said, you know, the role model has kind of changed, and it's kind of like, you know, I feel kind of slightly more fulfilled. Like, I'm like, you know, he's got something to look up to. You know, I'm not going to say to him, you have to kind of go back to Jan. I'm not going to say, you have to do this, you have to do that for a living. You do what you kind of want, but also make it feasible, because I'm not going to pay for your ass all your life. That's my dad coming in me there.
But yeah, that role model thing is absolutely beautiful. Like, you know, similar to you, like, you know, I remember the first time both saw my first book, because I've got my books here. And it was just kind of like, is that daddy? Like at the back, like the picture, like he was like, maybe 3. And he was like, oh, that's daddy. And he took a copy of the book and he kept it with him. And so they grow up seeing things like that, either things that I create, things that, you know, I've been in, that I've done, and things like that. They grow up with that. And that's what I'm saying. I don't know how he makes sense of it in his head, but, you know, I'm impatient. I'm impatient to see what that would look like, what he's going to take from that. And what I want you to say about what you said about, you know, when you seem so negative to him, I don't see that as a bad thing. I don't. I think they need to see you in both capacities. I'm not always happy because of, you know, yes, I live my dreams every day. I often say this. You know, teaching is part of it. I've got the businesses, I've got the artistic endeavors, I've got the modeling, I've got the X, Y, and Z. But I'm not always happy. And they see that, and I want them to see that. I want them to see the authentic side of this. I don't want them to just see, oh, you know, daddy's great and daddy's doing, I want them to see everything, the full spectrum, you know, because then they're able to just be like, that's how they learn, that life is not through rose-colored glasses. It's not. And life is actually, it's tough. Because as much as we're talking about all this, the important thing that for me to teach them also is that life is tough and life is cruel. You know, and I know it sounds like, you know, but this is the reality. And I think one of the biggest things that we can actually prepare them for is for that as well. You know, whatever I've been through as a person has not been a walk in the park. My parents, bless them, they did everything that they could to protect, but, you know, things still happened. We've had a tragedy in my family with my brother when he was 13. Like, you know, my parents did everything to shield us, but things happen. And I just wish that sometimes from their perspective, what they've done was that they've prepared us a bit more, you know. So for me, it's important to, you know, to just kind of show the full spectrum. Eddie,
Yeah,
I know you're
I
looking
think-
at the time.
Yeah, I'm going to wrap it up now. I'm going to stop recording in a second, but it's been really, really awesome, guys. And I know DG came in kind of a little bit later on today, but thanks for your input as well. It's been great. I mean, to end on that note, the whole role model thing, and actually what you said, Jan, so important. You know, the rough with the smooth, the good and the bad side of that. You know, we try things, we succeed, but we also fail and we fall and we hurt. So, you know, super important to have all of that on the table when it comes to being a parent, being a dad, you know, all really important stuff. Well, thank you, everybody. It's been great. This is as you know, it's recorded, and I'll send that over to you, Jan, and we'll get that up on the platform.
Yes.
But it's been awesome. Thank you very much for your time, guys.
Thank you so much, Reese, for joining us.